Hey guys, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. We are out at Gili. I am decoupling the satellite. We're going to get this bad boy into its orbit and start gathering some of the science, and more importantly, start mapping, because I want to have maps of every planet. Eventually we'll have to send out updated satellites and stuff, of course, because this thing only has the technology that's available right now. So there's higher resolution scanners and stuff that will be available later that we'll have to send out at some point. And we're still contending with the signal delay here, so just go ahead and fast forward. Now, the second part of this probe, the signal delay, is going to be a little bit more of an issue for, but it doesn't really matter too much for this, so we'll just keep going forward until we actually get separated here. Alright, so the decoupling has finally taken place. At this point I was still having issues with remote tech, where once it got out of physics range from the main craft, the relays stopped working. So I'm going to get the antennas and the satellites and all that stuff deployed, and then I have to switch back to the command center and come back, and it fixes things for whatever reason when it reloads. But it's kind of an annoying problem that's been ongoing. I'm way behind on updates for Kerbal Space Program. A lot of my mods get broken by some of the newer versions and stuff, so I'm still kind of hanging back. I have a second installation that I'm going to be working on getting my save actually working in that before we update. It's a good and a bad thing about this game that it's still in development. There's a lot of changes happening still, and of course the mod community does its best to keep up, but people come and go, things don't work the same as they used to, and breaks things. So we'll probably be staying with 0.23, 0.5 for a little while until I can get my save working. I know the Interstellar mod has had some issues where the developer Fractal UK has kind of disappeared, I guess, and it's kind of going in a different direction with a new developer working on it. I don't know all the details. I haven't really looked into it, but for now we're just going to keep on working with what's been working and get out of physics range here and come back. Alright, so we reloaded the ship, came back in, everything seems to be working again. Starting to get some of the mapping done here. Our inclination's been changed. Nothing takes like hardly any effort at all out here because of the speeds involved around Gili. So this is actually a lander, and I'm super concerned about actually getting landed down there, because the speeds involved are very low. Gili actually rotates quickly enough that relative to its size and stuff, that's actually a little bit of an issue. It'll say that you're actually traveling at a certain speed even if you aren't, and so I'm a little bit concerned about that, but we'll see how that ends up playing out. I'm not going to be able to use MechJeb to do the landing, I don't think, because MechJeb is going to just have a lot of problems trying to understand what's happening around Gili, and at the same time I'm not really going to be able to do a manual landing because of the signal delay, so we're going to have to use some of MechJeb's features to do sort of a half-assed landing as best we can. I have MechJeb set up here to pick the landing target. I want to be on the bright side of Gili, but everything takes so long out here. We're moving at such low speeds that actually by the time I get over to that side of the planet, it's not so light over there, so it's a little bit unfortunate. These little puffs of exhaust, that's all it took. Kind of crazy out here. I really like Eve. The view out here is great. I'll probably not really build anything on Gili because there's not really any point to it, but maybe I'll put a space station way out around Eve sometime, because I really like the view out here. Of course, in real life, Venus is not the sort of place you can really go to the surface of. It's too hot, metal melts and stuff at just atmospheric temperatures there, but that sort of stuff doesn't seem to matter in Kerbal Space Program still, so I don't know, we'll probably send some guys out here at some point. I know it's really hard to actually leave the surface of Eve again, but it does seem like we should at least try to get some sort of samples from down there. So we're just working on some fine adjustments and stuff here. The descent is going to take a really long time, so we'll just skip forward here. And at this point, MechJeb was already having trouble trying to make adjustments and stuff. And time warp is limited here, so you can't really warp too far ahead to try to make things go quicker or anything either. So Gilly is definitely an exercise in patience. I'll probably limit the amount of stuff I actually do around Gilly because of that, which is kind of a shame because, you know, it's not particularly interesting, but like I said, I like the view from here. So as you can see, we are still descending, and Gilly has rotated a fair amount, which means that we're now coming down in the dark. It's kind of ridiculously mountainy on Gilly as well. You know, they're not the tallest mountains, but relative to Gilly's size, they are very big. So it's a little bit problematic to try to find a suitable landing spot. Like I said, I've never landed on Gilly before either, so it's definitely some learning to be done. I keep trying to fine-tune this so I can find some spot that looks better, but it's probably going to be a little bit rough. It's kind of more like docking than it is like actually landing with the speeds that we're talking about here. They are very, very slow. Got another nice view here though as we go in. Sun is definitely a little brighter and more impressive out here. So we are on our approach now, trying to get the gear extended, and of course we have the signal delay and whatnot. So I don't know why the gear wasn't extending correctly. I don't know. I was right clicking on it to do it, but I did, and eventually it extends more or less. So it's really dark down there. Starting to see a little bit of the surface scatter. I thought, yeah, there's the surface scatter. So we're gonna have the sun at a really low angle to the horizon. It's not too bad. It's still somewhat visible, the surface. I don't know how it's gonna show up when I render this video out, but the surface is somewhat visible, and as we get closer, it gets even easier to see. But basically, what I'm trying to do here is keep my vessel vertical. So we're using the Translatron. We aren't able to use the automatic landing features, so the surface is rotating relatively quickly under us, and the speeds are very, very low, like I said. So MechJeb has an incredibly hard time compensating. So it's kind of a semi-manual maneuver that we're doing here. The signal delay is still like, what, a minute and a half, almost. That's more than 2 minutes or something here. So full out manual landing is not possible, so we're gonna have to just keep you know, tweaking these settings in the Translatron to come in as slow as reasonable. And MechJeb's doing a very good job of keeping us on a good descent right now. So the surface scatter, I probably should have brought up the surface info here. I don't know why I didn't. Like, one of the major advantages of having MechJeb is that you get a lot better instrumentation than the game has. I really probably should have brought that up. It would be a lot easier to tell. I also probably should have put some lights on these things. For some reason, I always forget to put lights on my unmanned craft because I'm like, well, nobody needs to see. Robots don't need lights, but I kind of do, you know. So I probably should have put some lights on it, but like I said, the sun's at a really low angle. It's actually kind of useful because the rocks show up really well. So just keep on cruising here at an incredibly slow pace. We're gathering some science from while we're on our way down. Might as well, makes it a little more interesting, I suppose. And like I said, Gilly really just try my patience. You can't get impatient here because the time warp factors that you're allowed are very low, and everything's just kind of a gentle, careful thing you do around here. So it's a little bit irritating, but we're getting there. And having a lot of trouble telling exactly how high up I am. MechJeb's putting on the brakes a little bit here. I don't think fuel is going to be too much of an issue. I wasn't even actually keeping track of my fuel because I knew that fuel was not going to be an issue. This thing could land probably on a much bigger body, like the Mun or something like that, so wasn't too concerned about that. So the signal delay finally came through, and 2 of our landing gear go down, but wouldn't you know it, the other 2 did not. So that's going to complicate things even a little bit further. Now I probably should have lowered my speed in the kill horizontal speed thingy, but I didn't. And this thing tumbles down the hill for a little while, but it does successfully land. We were kind of on the side of a mountain, and it probably did this for like 2 minutes, so I'll just skip ahead here until it finally kind of settles down, I guess. Fortunately, nothing broke when it was doing this, but I don't think it would have mattered if I had all the landing legs out. It's really funny to watch it fall in this kind of slow motion here. It's weird. The tumbling. That antenna apparently is tougher than it seems. Kind of gets a little bit of air going here. So we're still just tumbling away. Can't even tell. I don't think it's touching the ground. No, it's not. But we end up nestling into a little valley down here at some point. It was not the best landing I've ever seen in my life, but it got the job done, I suppose. So what can I say? Yeah, I guess it was touching the ground still. Whatever. And sliding. Still sliding. It's kind of like when you when the Kerbals fall over, they slide for a long time, but alright, I think it's settled down. We can get some science done now, I think. So I was kind of waiting until there was some sunshine, because we need to transmit science data from the surface, and I don't have any electrical power to do such things. And I don't know exactly how long the day is on Gilly, but we're gathering lots of science, and we'll just hold off here, see how our electrical charge is. It's alright, whatever. But we'll just hold on to the data for now until we actually get the sun shining here again. I'm just trying to take a look here and see what's happening. And again, the time warping, now that we're on the surface, is a little bit more reasonable, but it's still pretty slow. But here we come. Got our satellite links. And do we have power? Maybe. Power? Yeah, I guess we are getting charged from something. And I saw a ship, you know, one of the, I don't know if it was the satellite or the main transport satellite, but there's something up there in orbit. We could see the little purple thing. It's kind of funny how slow they go overhead here. So we'll do some more science. Why the heck not? That's why we're here. And we should be able to get a pretty decent amount of science from Gilly, I think. So that's good. Do our little time warp trick here and start transmitting stuff. Send it all. Oh, there's a nice shot of Eve there. That's pretty photogenic, worth taking a shot of, I suppose. Kind of a weird feeling the way that it's rotating, Gilly's rotating. You can't really tell because of the ground and stuff, but you definitely can tell by Eve moving there and the stars moving. So at this point, I gathered about as much science. We'll probably gather a little bit more science from that probe, but I figure it's time to go spend some of the science that we just got. See what we can unlock here. Kind of getting down on the tech tree here. So we have hypersonic flight, which gives me some cool things, but flight isn't really a giant priority. We have the specialized electrics, and that's much more useful, so we'll go for that. Because we have the microwave receivers and transceivers and whatnot now, so you can get some beamed power going now. Alright, so we have a maneuver that we need to conduct on a small craft that's going out to our communications relay satellite. I'm sending a little worker bee out there, worker drone, so that I can reorient how the dishes are pointed and stuff, because right now I just kind of haphazardly put it all together. It's kind of tricky getting these encounters way out here, because again, the speeds involved are very, very low. So I'm going to use my usual tactic of selecting the target, bringing up the target info window, and manually burning in different directions to see where I can get the closest approach. So that's what we'll be doing here in just a minute. Alright, so you can see there I have the target info up. I just had the ship manually turn its, or automatically turn itself prograde, but we're going to do some burning in random directions to bring that closest relative approach down. The closest approach right now is like 22 or 33 kilometers, so it bounces around quite a bit out here because the math is not perfect on these things. So I'm just burning with the RCS in every which way. Keep the in this case I'm going to keep the Smart ASS actually pointed prograde, and I'm just going to see if I tweak the direction what actually happens. It doesn't seem like it was actually working correctly, so I just flip it around to see if I can get my head around things a little bit better. Little tiny puffs make a huge difference out here, so just keep adjusting it until I can get, basically I want to get as close as possible, but anything within like visual distance where I can just manually burn is probably acceptable. So I'll just keep tinkering with this here for a minute. Alright, so we're fine-tuning a little bit further. These are just tiny little bursts here. We're down in the neighborhood of a kilometer or so. Like I said, the actual distance bounces around quite a lot, so we're just going to assume that the kilometer thing is correct. When we enter time warp, it's going to freeze at a certain number, but then when we leave again, it will bounce around. So we'll just see what happens, I guess. So now I've created a maneuver to match velocities at closest approach. These do not end up usually being very precise, but it's generally good enough, and it gets the automatic time warp going, which I always like. We had a whole day here, basically, of warping, so definitely took a little bit to get out here. It's fairly time consuming if I send anything out here to the space station at this range. It's probably why space stations usually aren't so far out, but I wanted to minimize the cone of interference from Kerbin and the Mun and stuff, so it works pretty well. It's just, you gotta be patient out here like Gilly. This is an episode with a lot of patient maneuvering, I guess. Trying to get a visual on where the heck this thing is. There it is. We got a nice view of Kerbin back there a second ago. And we are screaming in here, trying to get a fairly big burn done. See how MechJeb ends up faring. Looks like it did pretty well, actually. Alright, so from here on, we're just manually gonna maneuver over there, and when we get closer, I will be back. Alright, so we have MechJeb up again here, and it's going to match our velocities now that we have an even close approach here. Looks like we'll be about 15 meters away. It won't end up being quite that close, but we are pretty darn close here. And how did you do? It's going to be less than 6, maybe a little less than 17 meters. So that's pretty good. So that means we're pretty much right on target. We can undock the little worker drone, go ahead and rearrange at the space station. I'll probably do all of that off camera because it's really just going to be a matter of undocking the arm of the station, backing up a little bit, getting the orientation the way that I want it to be, and then redocking. It's probably going to be kind of hard too because those station arms are fairly long and this tug has fairly low mass, so it'll probably be sort of irritating to do, but it needs to be done because I don't like it being all discombobulated and stuff. So we'll go ahead and park this thing up there and start working on rearranging the station. Alright, so this thing's just coming in for its final docking here. Like I said, I'm not really going to show all the rearranging that I need to do here on screen because it's going to be fairly tedious and lengthy, but we do have this thing safely delivered, and then we'll go ahead and, like I said, fix this off screen, return the craft that brought this thing out here back down to Kerbin. For some reason it started rotating really badly there, so what I ended up doing, this is post commentary again, is I controlled just from one of the docking ports. We go ahead and straighten the station out just so that I can kind of tell what the heck is going on, and then I'll go through each section, undock it, redock it, kind of tidy it up a little bit. Alright, well, the station's still orienting itself, so I'm going to actually leave it here for today. We're going to have to send out some more modules to this in the future because need to be able to control more ships remotely. Basically, there needs to be at least one arm for each planet that we're going to be dealing with so that it can control everything, you know, it can relay to the satellites that we're eventually going to put around each of the planets and so forth. So that'll be a lot more construction work, but that's for the future. And for now, we're just gonna head on back home with the main craft that brought everything up. The station is a little bit tidied up there, as you can see, and we'll just go crash this thing into Kerbin, and I'll be back next time. Thanks for watching.